Hello and welcome to Pro-Life Primetime News. Today is Friday, June 16th. I'm Leslie Palma.
And I'm Teresa Watson. We're so happy you've joined us tonight. In our top story, we will tell you about a new Billboard campaign that is getting women's attention in Cincinnati. Our guest, Mike Seibel, is with us to tell you all about his new project.
Teresa will update you on pro-life President Donald Trump's indictment and tell you about nearly 300 absentee ballots found in Michigan from the 2020 election.
Leslie and I will take you on the road with Priests for Life and share with you a special award received by National Director Frank Pavone.
A woman in Great Britain was sentenced to 28 months in prison after killing her baby with abortion pills when she was between 32 and 34 weeks pregnant. I will tell you the heartbreaking details of this story and other news in Abortion in the News.
Our special guest, Dr. Alveda King, will explain the history of Juneteenth and why it is such an important holiday in our country.
And trust me, you need to stay till the end to see our special guest, Christian recording artist Mike Donahe, who'll tell us how he manages his career and being a husband and dad of 4 young daughters.
A new Billboard campaign has kicked off in Ohio, and its organizers hope to spread their message on billboards across the nation. The newly incorporated Reproductive Injustice has erected 8 billboards along Interstate 75 in Cincinnati, asking women if they have been harmed by an abortion and providing a phone number and website if they would like legal assistance. It's a brilliant idea, and we've invited New Mexico attorney Mike Seibel to talk about the new project. Mike is senior counsel for Reproductive Injustice and Abortion on Trial. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Glad to be here. It's always a pleasure to be with Priests for Life.
So, Mike, I love this idea. In your work with Abortion on Trial, which I believe you founded, you've represented the families of women who have been killed by abortion and women who have been injured. Is the Billboard project an outgrowth of that work?
Abortion on Trial is always prided itself on representing women against an unsafe and unregulated abortion industry. We are sort of the pro-life street lawyers for America, representing women regarding malpractice, statutory violations, or negligence. And this is an outgrowth of that. We are expanding nationwide. We're hitting local communities, developing networks so that women can have representation in their local community, assisted by somebody with legal knowledge and experience in abortion malpractice cases.
Wow. Well, why did you choose Ohio for the kickoff?
Oddly enough, I'm glad you asked that question, because it all started at Priests for Life's headquarters in Titusville, Florida in February of this year. Laura Streetman and I were sitting down talking at that meeting. And when we were talking, she told me about 3 ambulances at a downtown Cincinnati clinic. I told her that they needed legal representation, and she said, this is exactly what we need, and it's a win-win situation. Not only can you advertise to abortion-injured women, either through the pill or at the clinic, but we can educate people ahead of a very important referendum about the dangers of abortion. She said we could make this like Camp Lejeune, and you know how nobody wants to drink the water there because of the lawyer advertisements. This will create an air of danger in the Cincinnati area ahead of the referendum, so that the general public realizes that abortion is in fact dangerous and women are entitled to compensation.
All right. So as you said, you've partnered with Cincinnati Right to Life for the signs in Ohio, but you're hoping to go nationwide. How can the pro-life movement get involved?
Sure. And, you know, not only have we started in Cincinnati, but Dayton and El Paso are on the way. If you would like this in your particular area of the country at this time, you can contact Jamie at abortionontrial.org, or you can contact info@reproductiveinjustice.com. We will evaluate the market you have for abortion clinics and what we can do in that area, as well as set up the legal network required so that we can go into that area and start representing women.
Okay. So if a woman calls the number or fills out the form on the Reproductive Injustice website, what can she expect to happen?
Well, her case will be immediately directed to one of our paralegals there. The paralegal will evaluate the urgency and the need and whether or not a case is actually happening, or if she can assist without the need of an attorney. However, if there is a case, we will go ahead and process that, get it over to the attorneys, where she'll have a free, confidential legal consultation about her rights and what she can do about the abortion industry's harm to her or negligence against her. If she does not have a case at that particular time, like we see sometimes, because women have waited too long because they're embarrassed about their abortion history and they miss the statute of limitations. We still want to care for and help these women. So we are going to refer those women over to a post-abortive healing network or post-abortive counseling. We want women not only to be compensated if they're injured, but we also want them to have safe, happy, and productive lives.
Well, Mike, are you getting any calls yet? Has anyone called?
We get a lot of website traffic right now, a couple of calls at this time. We're expecting more as this campaign just starts to grow across this country.
Well, this is a great way to counter the lie that abortion is safe for women. And I hope groups in every state where abortion is still legal will partner with you. And I want to thank you so much for coming on and for everything you do for the women who are victims of legal abortion.
Good night, Mike. Thanks so much for joining us.
Good night, Teresa and Leslie. It was a pleasure to be here.
All right, we'll check back with you soon.
The indictment of former President Donald Trump by a federal grand jury in Florida includes the most detailed look yet into special counsel Jack Smith's investigation into allegations that Trump mishandled classified documents and obstructed the probe himself. The 44-page document unsealed in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida last week outlines the types of highly sensitive documents Trump allegedly had at his Mar-a-Lago resort in Palm Beach, and includes key pieces of evidence gleaned from aides' communications and notes from Trump's own lawyer. The former president is charged with 37 felony counts, including 31 counts of willful retention of classified documents and 1 count of conspiracy to obstruct justice. Trump has repeatedly asserted he has done nothing wrong. He pleaded not guilty to all 37 counts during his arraignment in federal court in Miami on June 13th. After his arraignment, Donald Trump did a very Trumpian thing. He immediately left the courthouse and went out to meet the American people. He stopped at a famous Cuban cafe, the Versailles restaurant, and a celebration broke out. People there sang happy birthday to Trump, whose birthday is appropriately Flag Day, and he bought lunch for the whole restaurant. Republican presidential candidate and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis was endorsed by Oklahoma Governor Kevin Stitt at a rally held on the outskirts on Tulsa this Saturday. Before DeSantis took to the stage, Stitt said he officially 100% endorses DeSantis. "We need the next president to be in office for 8 years. We've got to defeat Joe Biden. I believe Ron DeSantis is the right guy," said Stitt. Election boards across Ohio are getting ready for a special election in August, and many may be facing a shortage of poll workers. Hamilton County Board of Elections Deputy Director Alex Linzer says they need nearly 2,500 people to run an election. Linzer says the board offers training 5 days a week, and the job does pay. He says the hope to get more young people involved, as many current poll workers are getting up in age. Voters will decide August 8th whether to make it harder to amend the state constitution. Issue 1 would require proposed amendments get the approval of 60% of voters. It would also require signatures for future amendments from all 88 counties, not 44 as currently stands. It would also drop the 10-day period for petitioners to get more signatures if the initial effort is short. While poll workers might be hard to come by, Linzer says they're planning for high turnout. We don't have a precedent for a statewide issue, special election in August, so it's hard to guess at what turnout could be. It is a highly controversial issue, so we do expect voters will be motivated. Linzer says they're planning on 30 to 50% of registered voters to participate in the special election. Nearly 300 absentee ballots from the 2020 election have been discovered in a storage unit in Michigan. The storage unit was being rented by a township employee in Thetford Township, Michigan. Township Supervisor Raquel Stank was given a tip last summer about missing absentee ballots being stored away. The supervisor alerted the Michigan Department of Attorney General and the Secretary of State. It was then reported to a local police officer who conducted a search to a storage unit last August. Reports are just now coming out after Stanky submitted a request under the Freedom of Information Act to the police department to learn what was discovered in its search. The request revealed that police found 289 absentee ballots in a storage unit rented by a township employee. According to the Straight Arrow News Media Miss tool, this story is being underreported by the media, with few outlets actually reporting on the hundreds of discovered ballots. A majority of news outlets reporting on this story are right-leaning, while left-leaning outlets are lacking coverage. In the local election of 2020, the township clerk won by a mere 19 votes. That outcome could have been different had the mail-in ballots discovered were properly sent out to voters. In an ABC poll from earlier this year, only 20% of Americans say they are confident in the integrity of the country's election system. While the ballots discovered in this case wouldn't have made an impact on the presidential election, the discovery is further impacting voter confidence in fair elections if ballots from 2020 are still being discovered. The Michigan Department of Attorney General is currently reviewing whether any laws were broken in the absentee ballot discovery. And that's political news in a nutshell. Priests for Life wants you to come with us on the road as we minister to the pro-life movement nationwide. We hope it inspires and encourages you as much as the events themselves inspire and encourage us.
Brian Kemper, a pastoral associate and the coordinator of street activism, has been quite busy. On April 26, he attended the Midwest March for Life in Jefferson City, Missouri, where he met up with Sean Carney of 40 Days for Life, Sister Dee Dee Byrne, and many other pro-lifers. He then spoke to youth at the Be the Change training workshop in Gaylord, Michigan. Brian continued his efforts in Ohio regarding the ballot initiative battle we've been reporting on. Ohio abortion petitioners tried to have Brian arrested a couple of times and failed. On May 10th, he attended the Decline to Sign rally in Columbus.
Janet Marana, Executive Director of Priests for Life and co-founder of the Silent No More Awareness Campaign, joined the Silent No More representatives at the Canada March for Life on May 11th. Janet then met up with Frank Pavone and Dr. Alveda King at leaders' meetings in Washington, D.C. for several days in May. Dr. Alveda King, board member and senior advisor of Priests for Life, received the George Washington Award from Bishop E.W. Jackson, who is a great friend of our work. Janet and Frank Pavone spoke at 2023 Night Vision in Colorado, sponsored by Praise Him Ministries, founded by another friend of the ministry, Victoria Hurst. Here's a short video of that event.
Brothers and sisters, you know as well as I, we've got a problem in this country. That the youngest, the smallest, the most vulnerable human beings, those at the very beginning of their lives, don't have the protection that you and I have. The children in the womb. They don't have the protection in most parts of the country. That's starting to change, praise God. But in most parts of the country, they're still not protected the way you and I are. And the question becomes, why not?
Frank Pavone and I attended the 2023 National Religious Broadcasters Convention held this year in Orlando. I met up with my friend Mark Anthony, host of the Patriot and Preacher Show. Frank had lots of radio and TV interviews and was honored with the Faithful Service Award by Bot Radio Network. Here's the video shown at the awards ceremony.
Frank Pavone was born in Port Chester, New York, and was ordained a Catholic priest by one of his pro-life heroes, New York Cardinal John O'Connor. Now an internationally known pro-life teacher, Pavone took over a fledgling organization called Priests for Life in 1993, and it's now one of the largest, most influential pro-life ministries in the world. For 30 years, he's traveled the country preaching, teaching, and activating Americans to stand up for life. He's a firm believer in the value of forging relationships and had close friendships with many abortion advocates, including Dr. Bernard Nathanson, an architect of the movement to legalize abortion, and Norma McCorvey, the Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade. Both of them became passionately pro-life. In the final days of 2022, the church decided to take his priesthood away over his political activism, but Pavone remains faithful to his vows and his commitment to life.
Many of our other team members were traveling also. Dr. Teresa Burke, pastoral associate and founder of Rachel's Vineyard, traveled to a national shrine in Doylestown, Pennsylvania, to use their brand new recording studio for the purpose of taping interviews with Rachel's Vineyard's retreatants. Bob Lalonde, Maine representative to the United Nations and the Organization of American States, as part of our international outreach, was pleased to take part in the Holy See mission to the United Nations May 17th Path to Peace Gala. Priests for Life has been supporting the Holy See mission for many years and is very grateful for its important work at the United Nations.
Thank you for coming with us on the road. The mainstream media is outraged. Members of the British Parliament are rethinking laws, and pro-aborts in Great Britain are planning to protest tomorrow over a prison sentence given to a woman who illegally aborted her daughter deep into the third trimester. Here's the story. During the coronavirus lockdown in 2020, 44-year-old Carla Foster moved in with an ex-boyfriend, but then got pregnant by another man. In the first months of that year, she did several computer searches looking for ways to abort her child. In one of the searches, she asked how to lose a baby at 6 months. So she was fully aware she was past the 24-week cutoff for legal abortion in England. Foster was able to obtain abortion pills by mail from the British Pregnancy Advisory Service by lying, saying she was only 7 weeks pregnant. Abortion pills are approved for use only through the 10th week in the UK. She took the pills in May 2020 when she was at least 8 months pregnant, and then had to call for help when she went into labor. The baby girl, named Lily in court records, was not breathing when she was born. An autopsy showed she was between 32 and 34 weeks gestation. Judge Edward Pepperall sentenced Foster, the mother of 3 other children, to 28 months. She is likely to spend 14 months in prison and serve the rest of her sentence at home. New York State Attorney General Letitia James last week filed a federal lawsuit against the Red Rose Rescue, a pro-life group whose members go inside abortion businesses to give roses to women in the waiting room and speak to them about choosing life for their babies. The lawsuit, filed in the Southern District of New York, seeks to prevent Red Rose members from coming within 30 feet of any abortion business, in addition to civil penalties and damages. A man indicted in the firebombing of a pro-life office in Madison, Wisconsin in 2022 is trying to have the charges dismissed. An attorney for Radindu Roychowdhury said the federal arson statute under which his client was charged is unconstitutional. Roychowdhury is accused of vandalizing and setting a fire in the Madison offices of Wisconsin Family Action in spring of 2022. "If abortions aren't safe, then you aren't either," was painted in cursive on the building's outside wall, along with the anarchy symbol and an anti-police slogan. The suspect also wants the court to suppress the findings of a search warrant of his home and his cell phone. Roychowdhury could face between 5 and 20 years in prison if convicted. A hearing on a lawsuit challenging a Nebraska statute protecting babies from abortion at 12 weeks has been delayed until July 19th over disputes about evidence and statements filed with the court thus far. The law remains in effect in the meantime. A trial to decide whether abortion remains legal in Wyoming won't begin until next year, it was announced Wednesday. The law at the center of the case, the Life is a Human Right Act, declares that an unborn child is a member of the human race under the state constitution and entitled to the right to live. The law reads, Wyoming's legitimate interests include respect for and preservation of prenatal life at all stages of development, the protection of maternal health and safety, the elimination of particularly gruesome or barbaric medical procedures, the preservation of the integrity of the medical profession, the mitigation of fetal pain, and the prevention of discrimination on the basis of race, sex, or disability. The law remains blocked, at least temporarily. A separate law protecting babies from chemical abortion is set to take effect July 1st. On Tuesday, Republicans in the U.S. House of Representatives voted to prohibit abortions taking place in Veterans Administration facilities. 34 Republicans outvoted 27 Democrats in the vote taken by the powerful House Appropriations Committee. The Republicans inserted the pro-life language into the military construction budget for 2024. 34 abortions were performed in VA clinics in the first 6 months since the Biden administration announced the new policy in September. Freshman Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, a Republican, has vowed to put holds on all of President Biden's nominees for positions in the Justice Department until, Vance said, Merrick Garland, the U.S. Attorney General, promises to do his job and stop going after his political opponents. When a senator places a hold on a nominee, the confirmation process becomes a much more drawn-out affair. Democratic state lawmakers from around the country were invited to the White House this week to talk about abortion. On Wednesday, Biden administration officials met with lawmakers from states where abortion is still available, and Thursday's meeting was attended by politicians from states where babies are protected from abortion. I think the common thread through everything is that people in all of our states are rising up and they're fighting back, said Ohio Senate Minority Leader Nikki Antonio. Pro-abortion U.S. Senators Patty Murray from Washington State and Tammy Baldwin from Wisconsin this week introduced the Reproductive Health Care Training Act, which would allocate $25 million a year of U.S. taxpayer money for 5 years to teach medical students how to kill babies through abortion. Medical schools in states where laws protect babies from abortion cannot train aspiring physicians to perform the procedure. And finally, the American Medical Association has voted down a resolution calling for life-saving care for newborns who survive abortion. The 476 to 106 vote came this week as the medical group met in Chicago. The pro-abortion American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists lobbied against the resolution. And that's abortion in the news. On Monday, the nation will celebrate Juneteenth. We'd like to share with you some of the history of America's newest national holiday. On Freedom's Eve, or the eve of January 1st, 1863, the first watch nights services took place. On that night, enslaved and free African Americans gathered in churches and private homes all across the country, awaiting news that the Emancipation Proclamation had taken effect. At the stroke of midnight, prayers were answered as all enslaved people in Confederate states were declared legally free. Union soldiers, many of whom were black, marched onto plantations and across cities in the South to read the proclamation and spread the news.
But not everyone in Confederate territory would immediately be free. Texas seceded from the Union in 1861 and joined the Confederacy. And following the Emancipation Proclamation, Southern slaveholders began moving their human captives into Texas, where few Union soldiers were stationed and the proclamation could be ignored. The slaves in Texas did not learn they were free until June 19, 1865, when some 2,000 Union soldiers arrived in Galveston Bay, Texas, led by Major General Gordon Granger. Granger announced that the more than 250,000 enslaved black people in the state were free by executive decree. This day came to be known as Juneteenth by the newly freed people in Texas. Juneteenth became a national holiday in 2021, and it marks our country's second Independence Day.
Dr. Alveda King, a Priest for Life board member and senior advisor, was a guest on Just Ask Janet, and here's what she had to say about the history and meaning of Juneteenth.
We didn't have social media back in those days, of course, and even telegrams and telegraphs possibly. So the word was getting around across the country that Emancipation Day on January 1st, President Lincoln signed an Emancipation Proclamation declaring that the slaves were free. And of course, there were celebrations all around America, but in the far reaches of certain places and down in Texas, the folks didn't get it until months and months later. So Juneteenth, on the day that those slaves found out that they were free, there was a big celebration. And of course, that the African-American community or the Black community grabbed hold to that Liberation Day. I add the word Jubilee to that because in the Bible talks about setting the Hebrew slaves free and you bless them. We ended up with the 40 acres and a mule and many of those things before Jim Crow destroyed those opportunities. So Juneteenth, just the last state, the last area in this country to discover that slaves have been free, occurred in Texas on June the 19th. And so that's where we get it. And now another part of history, when I met Father Frank Pavone in 1999, we began to work together. I was introduced to Janet and Silent No More Awareness Campaign. And then in 2005, I went to work for 16 years before I retired at Priest for Life as first director of African American Outreach, which became Civil Rights for the Unborn. One of our main pillars every year was to explain and to talk about Juneteenth. So as a result, when President Donald John Trump was elected in 2016, the Trump administration asked me and many of the Black leaders to explain to them about Juneteenth. And so President Trump did the lion's share of the work to get this to be a holiday. He was the first administration of presidents to celebrate fully Juneteenth at the White House. And then, of course, President Biden was sworn in and he signed that law.
This Sunday, June 18th, is Father's Day, always celebrated on the third Sunday in June. Father's Day was inaugurated in the United States in the early 20th century to complement Mother's Day in celebrating fathers, fathering, and fatherhood. Sonora Smart Dodd, whose mother died when she was 16, leaving her father to raise 6 children, founded the holiday that was first celebrated in Spokane, Washington in 1910.
We have with us here tonight a father who somehow manages a career as a Christian artist, author, podcast host, and being a husband and wonderful dad to 4 daughters. We are honored to have our friend Mike Donahe with us. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the intro. I do manage all of that. We didn't declare how well I manage it.
Very
Well, Mike,
true.
before we get to your family, catch us up on your latest projects.
Yes, I think the latest project is a book that I just released called Grace and the Gray, A More Loving Way to Disagree. So in addition to my songwriting, I like to go long form and write about books. And having the unique perspective of being in my band 10th Avenue North for so long, I've gotten to play in over 1,000 different churches. So I've learned a little bit of something about disagreement. And I suppose you could say this is my book writing to Christians to stop freaking out on each other.
And how do people get the book?
Oh, you can go online. It's in the major places, I suppose. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Mike, now let's get to your family. Tell us a little bit about your family.
I am married to my wife, Kelly, we just celebrated 15 years. What's up? And we have 4 daughters. So pray for me. I do need celebrating this Father's Day. I appreciate that backstory. I go, well, I'm not raising 6, but I'm raising 4. And it's amazing. Just someone's always crying in my house. And sometimes my girls are crying too. You know what I'm saying?
So tell how do you manage to juggle it all? Your career, you must travel a lot. Your wife, your daughters. What advice do you have for busy dads like you?
Well, I suppose my first advice is know which balls when you're juggling, which ones you should let fall and shatter. And not all the balls should have the same priority. So the thing I say to new fathers, I say, remember, you got a new perspective. You're not living for a resume anymore. You're living for a eulogy. And so keep that in mind when you're trying to figure out which things to give more attention to.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah.
Well, in your book, Grace to Gray, you discuss a loving way to deal with people with differing viewpoints. Share with our audience. We'd love to get a few tips on how to do that.
Did you hear I have 4 daughters? I'm constantly disagreed with on just about everything. I started the book, I think, when my band was picketed by a group of, I suppose, well-meaning fundamentalists who were declaring we were using drums and were influenced by secular bands. Therefore, our music was the devil's music. And I went out to them and tried to talk to them. You know, I said, we're getting picketed. Let's go talk. And I went out and they're screaming at people in line that they're going to hell. And I just asked them, hey guys, how do you feel like this strategy is working? And they said, it doesn't matter. We're telling them the truth. And I think, unfortunately, that's a lot of our perspective is we don't consider how should I say, deliver our perspective. We just think about, as long as I deliver the truth, that's all that matters. But after I left that conversation with those guys, I went through some of Paul's letters, and over he says things like speaking the truth in love. You know, in 1 Corinthians 13, he says, I could speak all these mysteries, but if I don't have love, I'm a resounding gong and a cymbal, right? And the one that really got me is when he's talking to Timothy in 2 Timothy, and he says, remember, Timothy, to correct your opponents with all gentleness. Like, we love the correct your opponents part, but he adds this caveat, with all gentleness. And I looked up the original ancient Greek, and apparently with all gentleness means with all gentleness, you know? And then he says this radical thing. He says, perhaps God will grant them repentance leading to the truth. And when I get entangled in a lot of debates, especially about spiritual matters where the stakes are elevated, something I try to remember is, at the end of the day, I might be used by God to change someone's perspective, but he's the one who's going to change their perspective. And that allows me to debate much more graciously, with much more gentleness, with much more love, and I can consider my posture as well as my position and hold those things in balance.
Great.
That's great.
That's awesome. So what are you going to do to celebrate Father's Day this year?
Well, I'm going to have my daughters bring me breakfast in bed. Then they're going to massage my toes. And then, no,
None of that's happening.
we're actually going to spend 7 hours on planes flying to Estes Park, Colorado, where we're going to start a family camp for the week.
Oh,
So
nice.
we'll be riding horses and hiking mountains. And one of the things we do to balance all this is make sure we set aside time just for our family to just enjoy each other. So that's what we're going to be doing.
Well, that's
Awesome.
fantastic.
That's great, Mike. Just one quick thing though before we say goodbye.
Yeah.
Show your new book one more time, and I just happened to order it, so I know you can get it on Amazon. So please be sure to check that out, Mike's new book.
Warning, you might win less debates.
Oh.
But you might
Feel
win
better about it.
but you might win more hearts of the people you're debating with. And so
All right,
it's an
well,
even trade.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time from your has to be a very busy schedule to join us. And we wish
It's
you and all
all-
the dads watching a beautiful and restful Father's Day.
Oh,
Safe
what a gift that would be. Thank you so much.
travels. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you so much for joining us on Pro-Life Primetime News, produced at Priests for Life headquarters in Titusville, Florida. We hope you will tune in every Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time.
If you like our show, please support us by making a donation to prolifegift.org. These donations help fund all of our work here at Priests for Life, which enables us to continue educating, equipping, and activating God's people to end abortion. I'm Teresa Watson, Executive Manager.
I'm Leslie Palma, Communications Director. Remember, life is the only choice.